Broadcasting from the heart of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I am your host, as always, David Gornoski, and I'm glad that you've joined me once again. The number to call if you'd like to be a part of the discussion today is 407-916-5400. That's 407-916-5400. And boy, do we have a lot to get to. Wow, did you see? Man, it's been another apocalypse. I mean, every week, it's like we get the weekend off, and then right on Monday, we get a new cycle of outrage where it's a meltdown. It's a Nazi fascist storm that's destroying our country. Every week, we got something to just freaking melt out about. And, you know, I'm just kind of over that. And I know you guys are too. And that's what we do here on A Neighbor's Choice. We deal with groupthink. We get rid of groupthink and we start learning how to think as persons using the principles of the historical Jesus to imitate his model for organizing our lives and solving the problems that we face. And so, you know, in 2006, if you recall, we had millions of protesters in the streets protesting Bush's Iraq war. They were protesting a war that they felt was unnecessary. And now here it is, 2018, we have millions of people protesting, shouting down people in restaurants, and they're protesting because a Republican president wants peace with the nuclear power. So what, my goodness, what has happened that the once noble anti-war left has just become in bed with perpetual war? I mean, the only time, if you recall, the only time the media has given Trump a break is when he sent some of those missiles onto Assad in Syria. I mean, they hushed in awe and they said, wow, thank you. You've got right back on script, just like we hoped that you would. And then he didn't quite go as far as they wanted. He didn't do a no-fly zone like Hillary Clinton promised during the campaign. And so they went back to hating him the next day. And so you see, whether it's North Korea or Putin, the media is just having a meltdown over the idea that Trump would have peace with people who have been our perpetual scapegoats for generations. So, you know, they try to make a big deal about, wow, oh, can you believe it? He is treasonous for meeting with Putin. And meanwhile, and it's all about this alleged collusion that's not been proven. Not one piece of fact has come out to prove any collusion between Trump. And yet, you know, they said the same virtual thing about North Korea, and no one is suggesting that there's any kind of North Korean collusion that was happening during the campaign with the Trump administration. So we see that it's just a useful narrative to justify why the Democrats lost so badly when they had 90% of the media shilling for their candidate, giving her the questions before the debates. You know, she outraised everybody. She had support from, foreign people like, some scary billionaires of her own that she has, including some people in Russia. And yet none of that, is ever covered by the media, because what the media wants to do is keep us stuck on the groupthink that we cannot have friendship with Russia, because how else can you justify a $1 trillion annual spending bill that is usually funding the Pentagon? $1 trillion we spend, give or take, each year on our foreign policy. Now, how else can you justify that if you have a president who's saying, hey, I think I'd like to be friends with North Korea. Let's open up trade. Let's open up dialogue. And the same goes for Russia. I mean, they are a nuclear power. And, it reminds me of the biblical story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. In that story, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Yeah, well, that's what we have here with Putin. He's a little short too, by the way. But, there's this idea that in the Bible story that the crowd, they're outraged. They don't like Zacchaeus because he's considered an enemy of the people. He is a tax collector, and he is in league with Rome. In fact, tax collectors during that time were often giving a lot of handouts and giveaways from Roman authorities. They were kind of like colluding, right, with the enemy of the people of Israel. And so there was a lot of people that hated Zacchaeus because he was a rich tax collector. He was young, and he was really taking advantage of people, they felt. So they wanted to exclude him from being able to see Jesus, but Jesus looked over the crowd and said, I'm going to have dinner with you. Now, Zacchaeus, the crowd says, he is a filthy sinner. You're going to be breaking bread with him? And that's exactly what the media is doing with Trump. They're saying, oh, if you were to have you're going to have dialogue with a foreign enemy. And of course, that's the whole same dynamic going on here today. We don't need to be saber rattling with a nuclear power. The people of Russia are very pro-American in terms of the actual citizens. And we know that sanctions don't work. In fact, before Obama's administration slapped on the sanctions and engineered the coup in Western Ukraine, or helped support it, the Russian population was very against Putin. There was a lot of internal resistance to his corruption, and there was a growing momentum to get reform. And that was all wiped out because of the Obama administration's sanctions and the support for saber rattling and arming and aggressively, antagonizing and saying that they're the villain of all villains. And so if we understand that what Trump's offering is, hey, let's have dialogue. And I think if you would go further and say, let's have trade, let's get rid of trade barriers between the countries. Let's get rid of some of the travel restrictions between the countries. And when you do that, it would be the greatest attack against Putin's internal power, because the population would have friendship with America. I mean, that's what happened with Vietnam. Once we opened up trade and travel with Vietnam, we don't have any problem with Vietnam. We get along with them. We have a lot of trade and a lot of mutual benefit from both countries, a lot of travel. The same thing can happen on a bigger scale with the world's second nuclear power in Russia. And so the problems that we have, they're really easy to solve. You just have to have the courage, folks, and I know you have the courage, to rethink groupthink, to challenge the sacred cows of Washington that always divide us and put us into these artificial camps where we're not allowed to question. And that's what I'm proud of Trump for doing that. I think it's one of his shining moments so far in his administration that he was willing to take on the heat from the establishment Republicans and Democrats and meet with someone who is considered a foreign villain and say, hey, look, if we make friendship with these guys, we can actually neutralize the problems that Putin faces. We can actually give the people of Russia an incentive to reform their internal government. And that's the way Jesus always taught us to do. He says, do not resist evil with violence, turn the other cheek. That's not a passive thing. That's a proactive way of allowing corrupt evil to fall on its own weight. That's what we have with Jesus' model. We have a proactive way of not picking sides and group tribalism. But look what we have today. We have people who are more outraged that Trump is trying to change old status quo groupthink in Washington, that they're willing to risk nuclear war with Russia. And it's insane. I mean, I just want to know, when is it going to end? I mean, already Trump has added more sanctions. He's allegedly, there's been reports that he ordered the killing of 200 Russian soldiers who were contract soldiers in Syria. I mean, what do they want? They want 10,000? I mean, what exactly does the whiny victims on the left, what do they really want? They're just pouting, and what they're pouting, look, I don't mind pouting. You can pout. I don't want to listen to it, but I am going to speak up when you're trying to threaten the safety of the world. That we could go into World War III with nuclear bombs flying left and right. I mean, Reagan had the courage to sit down and talk to the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. And he had dialogue with him, and he was able to really neutralize a lot of the tensions where we could have had a world-destroying epic collapse. And so there is a precedent in American tradition. If you go back even to the founding fathers, John Quincy Adams, he said, America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. And that is the principle of strategic independence. It doesn't mean that you can't have a robust self-defense. Of course you can. It doesn't mean that you can't, trade. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you have free trade, free travel, but you don't go sanctioning and starting all this saber rattling. First of all, we can't afford it, folks. We can't afford it. We're in debt with trillions of dollars. We just can't afford to be spending all this money to defend Germany or, all these other people in Europe. So we have to really have the courage. Don't worry about the negativity, people. They're just squawking. I mean, they squawked about Bush as if he was an unprecedented fascist. Now they love him. I mean, they just switched. They changed their ideas like their clothes. So they're really just kind of, don't take what they're saying seriously. But we do have to be firm in speaking out for what's true, what is the best course for our prosperity, peace, and liberty in the world, and taking care of people here at home and not getting into debt just to appease the special interest in Washington who make money off of this endless fear-mongering. So we're going to have a jam-packed show today. We have a YouTube star coming up from Kevin's Corner, Kevin Ellerby. He'll be joining us in just a moment. You are listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski, and you're listening to News Radio 102.5 WFLA. And welcome back, folks, to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I am your host, David Gornoski, and I have a great guest coming up here. He is Kevin Ellerby. He's a YouTube star. Kevin Ellerby is his name. You can find him on Kevin's Corner if you search for that on YouTube or Google. And I've really enjoyed watching his videos. And he's got a quick wit. He's got all kinds of unique angles on challenging the sacred cows of politics. And I just think he's got a great, fresh voice that we need to, help spread the message for liberty. And, if you want to join in and talk to Kevin today, it's 407-916-5400 is the number to call the studio if you have a question or a comment. And that's 407-916-5400. Also coming up on the show, we'll be joined again, as we previewed in the last show, with NASA physicist Dr. Yu, who is a theoretical physicist who challenges the groupthink of physics that unlocks, if he's correct, it unlocks new ways of innovating that don't rely on big government to solve for us. So you'll be hearing from him later on in the program. But Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, David, and it's an honor to be with you this evening.
And thank you. Yeah, I've seen a lot of your videos, and you used to be a Democrat. You were kind of a mainstream leftist, right?
Absolutely. Grew up in the inner city of Youngstown, Ohio. Grew up in a typical urban environment where the majority of the people in my environment were Democrat, of course. And, of course, my mother and my father were Democrat. And it's kind of funny because, prior to becoming, older and seeing things totally different, I just voted Democrat. My first couple times voting, I voted Democrat because that's just the way it was supposed to be. Nobody even told me why. It's kind of like, you grew up in a Christian home, and until you become old enough to embrace the doctrine of Christ for yourself, you just kind of believe as a Christian because mom and dad told you that that's how you're supposed to believe. So, I went out and I would just vote Democrat, and I'll never forget as a young man, a young boy growing up in the inner city, my mother, when Reagan got in office, she came to me, and we grew up on a lot of government assistance programs, and she came to me and she said, now that Ronald Reagan's in office, everything's going to be taken away. And you know what's going to happen? There will be no Christmas. And at 9 years old, you tell a kid there's no Christmas. I was upset with Ronald Reagan and didn't even know why. I was like, who is this Ronald Reagan, and why is he taking Christmas? And so I just went on a long journey up until about the age of 22, 23, where I just voted repeatedly as a Democrat. But what really started me to transition from the Democratic Party and just the whole liberal movement was accepting Christ in my life in college. Wow. And once I did that, I started seeing that the majority of the Democratic views was really, just it didn't line up with my Christian values. And it wasn't just that they didn't line up with my Christian values, but as time went on, it started to become not passive, but aggressive when it comes down to enforcing their values on society. And I kind of just saw, how this was going. I'm going, wow, this is going in a very dangerous direction, because it's just a matter of time before it comes knocking on the church of on the doors of the church, on people's personal doors. And sure enough, we're living it now. We're kind of seeing the manifestation of this liberal movement, and I think the engine behind it, as you see just by watching the media, is heavily relying on the Democratic Party and their movement. So I'm glad that I walked away when I did. But for years, I kind of laid neutral. But this last election has just infuriated me, and I think it really opened up what's really going on. Those that have an eye to see and an ear to hear, it really started to shine a light on how corrupt and how demonic some of the doctrine and views from the liberal movement is just flooding our society. So it made me just say, you know what, it's time to just open my mouth and start talking about it. And that's what happened. And next thing you know, Kevin's Corner was born, and the rest is kind of making history, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you've got millions of views on YouTube. You're all over the place. I saw you were meeting with a lot of other stars like Candace Owens. So you're really like on the front lines of really trying to get people to challenge their groupthink. And, I'm not really partisan, so I have a lot of friends on both sides, but I think they're really, you're right, it's the ideology of victims that we really have to confront, and it's a perversion of Christianity. It's like, I call it like a Christianity with a machine gun. It's like you're trying to force people to be kind or to be loving to their neighbor with the threat of coercion through, taxes, regulations, redistribution, speech laws, all the little things they want to do to micromanage our lives. And it's like a perversion of Christian values, because instead of, Jesus puts the emphasis on the individual sharing the burden of loving their neighbor, not hiring people to go force that neighbor to change his heart, right, or his behavior.
Absolutely. And, I think, too, it's funny how, to me, it seems as if this whole progressive movement is trying to give society an alternative to feel good about their life without Christ. They're imitating Christian values, but it's false. It's they're saying you have to be sensitive what you say to people. You have to be tolerant. All these things on its face value sounds great, but what are you tolerating becomes the question. Tolerant to what? What if what they're doing violates your morals, your Christian beliefs? Do you have to embrace it? Do you have to tolerate it? So on the face value, I think it puts it out there as we're trying to create this utopian society through legislation, through progressive thinking, but we're going to shove it down your throat. And anything that you want people to embrace, I don't think the way to go about it is shoving it down their throat, first of all. But secondly, I think it's an effort to make people's conscience not be burdened by the gospel, to make people feel like, hey, I'm doing good, because the way they package it, it sounds great on the surface until you start to unravel it. And so I think it's very dangerous, and it's funny how when you look at the things that a lot of the progressive movement is attacking, besides the president, of course, but it all comes down to either the president, and then they somehow want to keep bringing up, Western Christian values and trying to tie it to the president, then go back to Western Christian values as if there's something nefarious about being a Christian. There's something outdated, or there's something oppressive about being a Christian. And so I keep finding the same narrative where they find their way attacking the church somehow, and if you can't even bring church up in the argument, and of course, you just open up a can of worms. That's a feeding frenzy for the left. And it's kind of, obvious to a degree. And I try to bring some awareness to people that are in the middle. And because I'm going to be honest, a lot of my friends that are not conservative or liberal, they're just reasonable people. They're just good people. And I try to just make a lot of those people in that category just be aware of the trickery and the manipulation that's being done to try to, move society in a direction that maybe they'll wake up one day and realize I didn't want to move in that direction. I didn't see how I got here, but I'm here, and they got me there through manipulation. But just making people aware, hopefully, will prevent a lot of that.
And if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Kevin Ellerby with Kevin's Corner on YouTube. He's a YouTube commentator, and he has moved away from the victimist narrative of groupthink that is dominating media, and he's now becoming more of an independent thinker, and he's using his platform on YouTube to really wake up a lot of people as well. And I really hope we can unify. I think, we've lost something that binds us together. And I think a lot of that has to do with the spirit of accusation. The word Satan, the original word for that, means accuser. And so, that's what I see happening constantly on the media, 24/7. It puts us in a really negative vibe where we feel the need to mirror their nasty spirit back at us because they're always accusing. You're wrong. You're racist. You're bad. You're this. You're that. Accuse, accuse, accuse. And that's just not the principle that our civilization prospered from. Our civilization prospered on cultivating, on self-sacrifice, not blaming you're trying to take your guilt and throw it onto the back of your neighbor. And I think Jesus saves us from that when we imitate his principles and apply them to our lives and our politics. I think it works, and I think you're a testament to that. So
thank you.
We're going to just hold for a second. We'll be right back in a few minutes. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm David Gornoski, and this is News Radio 102.5 WFLA. And welcome back, folks. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio on News Radio 102.5 WFLA, and I have the privilege to be speaking with Kevin Ellerby, who is the host of Kevin's Corner on YouTube. He's a downright YouTube star, and he is all about questioning the victim ideology that plagues so much of mainstream popular culture and media. And he's a voice for people who are tired of feeling alone, like nobody wants to have common sense anymore. And so, Kevin, what got you in? What made you decide to start a YouTube page, and how did you end up getting millions of people watching your stuff?
Well, I tell you, I'm a firm believer of sometimes your gift will make room for you. And I kind of live by the premise of do things that you're passionate about, do things that you enjoy doing, and then this way you will do it with sincerity. You won't do it for some other hidden motive or desire, and I think that the doors were just open for you, because when it came down to the YouTube channel, I was watching how people were responding during the primary elections with Hillary and President Trump. And it bothered me because I was able to see some of the obvious bias and manipulation that was taking place, and I couldn't understand why so many other people wasn't able to see it. And it wasn't just that there was differences, but it became very malicious in intent and very methodical when it comes down to how they were trying to portray some of the things that the president said. One of the biggest things that kind of invoked me to start speaking out about it, because at first I was just kind of sitting back watching. But when President Trump gave his speech talking about that he was going to run, he came down the escalator, and I watched the whole entire speech. Then that evening, I see on CNN, big bold words, President Trump calls all Mexicans rapists, murderers, and drug dealers. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I watched that whole segment, and that's not what he was referring to. He didn't say everybody was drugged, And that's when my antennas went up, and I started becoming more aware of the coalition between the Democratic Party and the liberal media. And when I started seeing that and other people couldn't, I just simply made a video to try to combat that and tell people to just be open-minded and be aware of the malicious intent and manipulation from the media. Well, I put a video out and didn't care anything about it. I mean, all of a sudden it hit like 30,000 views and, sparked up a big conversation. And then I said a couple things on Facebook, and it kind of got ugly there. But I got the attention of some of the minority Republicans in the Ohio area. And so they invited me down to Columbus to speak out about why I support President Trump. And they did a live stream on Facebook. And, oh, my goodness, you already know what happened. It was vicious. And the irony is that my Facebook friends from the past were attacking me as if they never knew me. These were some of the people that were attacking me were people I knew for years, and you would have thought we never had a friendship or anything. And the attacks were so malicious, so vicious, and, it wasn't like I said anything crazy. I just, did a short video about why it's important to look at things a little differently and be open-minded and not easily manipulated. They attacked me so viciously, but the people that had befriended me from the video I posted on YouTube, I didn't realize that they had also became my Facebook friend as well, and they rushed into the defense. And from that point on, they were asking for more content.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like what you encountered was the state worship that is very prominent. And it's not just the left. The right has a lot of it, too. There's this sense that we don't need to take responsibility for ourselves, to solve our health care choices ourselves, to love our neighbor as ourselves. We just got to hire somebody, and they'll pass the buck for us. And it really does become kind of like a cult. I call it the cult of the state. And we're never going to get the problems that because the people on the left, most of them are good intended people, just like on the right. It's just that these are bad ideologies that reject the truth, and they reject beauty. And they're just motivated by anger and guilt. And the only way you can get rid of that guilt is to self-sacrifice. Take up your cross and go by your neighbor. And if you feel like, for example, with the left, they're obsessed with trying to make everybody equal on financial, economic issues. And I say to myself, look, Jesus says don't resist evil with violence. You cannot use force to get someone to change their economic practices. It's only going to make them bitter, resentful. Yeah. It's going to make them cling back and hold their dollars a little bit more stingier. They're going to feel victimized themselves, and they're going to want revenge. And you're never going to heal that. And so I think what you're doing is so powerful because, to me, it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's just about personal responsibility. If you're concerned about health care, don't get Bernie to fix it for you. Get in there and help chip in to solve cancer cures that we don't even know about, to solve real issues and really roll up your sleeves and love the least of these yourselves. And I think that's what it all comes down to. And we're speaking here today with Kevin Ellerby from Kevin's Corner. And if you'd like to join in or have a question, it's 407-916-5400. I'm David Gornoski, your host as always. And, Kevin, so tell us, what's your big plan in the big scheme of things? Let's start, how about the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you want to do this as a full-time thing? Or, what's your goal with this?
Well, that's interesting. One part of me, I try to be sober when it comes down to anything I get involved with. I try to allow things to progress in a reasonable way and keep my head on a swivel because, of course, I realize the greater you become, the bigger the fall, and also you just invite a lot more. I'm sure President Trump didn't think he would be getting hit with all the troubles he's been getting hit with, but I just understand, it's more, the more you progress, the more responsibility you have. And I don't take it lightly. I take it very soberly. So I just want to continue to grow, my channel and allow me to just get my voice out there in a way that I start to see people just really either waking up or at least starting to think more critically. And also, a lot of people ask me, why did you get into politics? I'm like, not after seeing how things are right now. But working from the position that I'm in, I believe it allows me to be more effective because the biggest vulnerability when it comes down to politics is not the politicians, it's the people that are victims of political manipulation. Right. Ultimately, the people have to make the votes. And if they're educated, if they're aware of some of the tactics that are being used, then they will vote hopefully more, soberly. And so that's my goal, is just to continue to grow my channel, to open up more platforms.
Well, very good.
To speak out.
I enjoy listening to your commentary. I want everybody to go look up Kevin's Corner on YouTube, and it's all about, like you said, it all goes down to, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places. Let's come together as a nation. Let's go across racial and ethnic boundaries, and let's get things done as neighbors. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski. And up next, NASA physicist Dr. Yu in the house. We'll see you there. News Radio 1025 WFLA. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio, and I am your host, David Gornoski. And if you want to be a part of the discussion on the most electrifying show in media, then you've got to tune in to News Radio 1025 WFLA here every Thursday at 8 o'clock, because we are about getting things done. We are past the old, outdated ideas where we just say, please, daddy government, mommy government, please tell us what to think. We're done with that, folks. And so if you want to be a part of the revolution that we're about here on A Neighbor's Choice, you can call in at 407-916-5400. And I am joined today with my chief science advisor. He is someone who boldly questions a lot of sacred cows. And look, you don't have to agree. You can disagree. You can vociferously disagree. But what I like about my friend, NASA physicist Dr. Wei-Ping Yu, is that he has the courage to really rethink even hundreds of years of old physics ideas and say, you know what, is this really working for us? We haven't had real innovation in technology in the world of, energy and transportation and medicine. It's been decades. It feels like we're stuck in a dark age. And I have an idea about why that is. I think it's because we're so hard to challenge. Well, if everybody says it's true and all the textbooks say it's true, it must be unquestionably true. And sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it's just calcified decades of groupthink that hardens, and there's a lot of money involved, and it's hard to get over that. But Dr. Yu, you're willing to challenge groupthink.
Yes. Thank you, David, for having me again. This is a great show. I wanted to emphasize the last segment when I mentioned about the common misconception of the biggest group thinking among all the fundamental science is about what electricity is.
Right. Now, you said that was last week. You hinted that we don't understand properly what electricity is. And if we get a better understanding of it, it might unlock real dramatic technological development, because we'll be able to then apply this new map that's more appropriate, right?
Yes. So by understanding why electricity still, after over 100 years since Ohm's law, and we still believe electricity is a flow of particle, that's electrons, negative charged particle, flow in the conducting material.
So actual particles are flowing through a circuit, right?
Solid wire, a closed circuit. That's what we believe. That's what.
Now, but if that's the case, now if I put a light bulb in a microwave, right, and I turn it on, I see it light up. What is going on? If that's a closed circuit that electricity goes through, why is it able to light up the light bulb?
That's a question raised by many audiences if you search online. So conventional wisdom say, in order for electrons traveling at 70% of speed of light, at that fast speed, equivalent to go around Earth's diameter 5 turns per second. In order to facilitate that motion, you need a closed circuit. But that's not what we observe daily. We often see, like the example you said, if you put an incandescent light bulb or fluorescent light bulb inside of a microwave without touch anything, right? You can suspend it without touching. If you turn microwave on, the light bulb will lit up.
So that defies that conventional understanding of electricity.
Yes.
So again, quickly, what is your conception of electricity? It's you said
Yes.
vibration.
I said what I discovered based on the fundamental theory, and I find out there is no motion. There is no flow motion of electrons. None so ever. But the question is, why we sense electricity? I found that's a wave motion. It's a vibratory wave motion. And there is one audience, one viewer or listeners of you from last segment raised a fantastic question. I believe it sends to you, right? It says that, Dave, sorry, electricity is a flow of electron.
Right.
Because we counted.
Remember that? We counted the electrons.
That's right.
Did they count the electrons? We're speaking, by the way, with Dr. Wei-Ping Yu, who's a theoretical physicist who is rethinking some of the foundational ideas of physics that have really not served us well.
That's right.
So is it true that we have been able to count electrons in current physics?
We do have a count. So let me see. We define Coulomb. Coulomb's the charge of electron, right? 1 coulomb equals to 6.241 10 to the 18th power of a charge of number of electrons. And also, we also defined the ampere called a flow of electron. So 1 amp equivalent to 6.241 10 to the 18th power of electrons per second. So everything seems like stacking against this new discovery, right? The key is how they account. Electron is the smallest particle based on quantum mechanics in the world. So no one ever see them, and no one will ever see them, because the size of an electron is 10 to the minus 18th power, which means a billions of size of a meter. Let me see. In order for us to see electron, we need, say, right now we need to use light wave. The visible light wave, the shortest wavelength equivalent to 10,000 diameter of atom, of hydrogen atom, basically is a proton. So in order to see electron, which is 1 billion times smaller than atom, you need a wavelength have to smaller than electron in order to see them. So that means there is no such wave can be smaller than electron unless, based on the generated particle motion, unless you have a super high energy, vibrate the electron itself. Okay, so that first point, electron nobody see it, and then nobody will see it based on the current technology. So you cannot count. Number 2 is the velocity. Electricity traveling at 70% of speed of light, 5 turns around Earth per second. So you cannot count them. So what they do, they base on the electrical signals from the electroscope, the signals, and based on the wave motion, you will see peak and valley motion. When you count that wave, that basically is a cycle motion of its vibration of electron.
So you're saying that electricity is not a flow of particles, it's a vibration. Now we need to get to the so what, because a lot of people here are saying, I don't have physics. I'm definitely not a rocket scientist as you are, Dr. Yu. So let's bring it home to people. Let's give people an application.
Yes.
If your theory of electricity is correct, we just have a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Please summarize a few ideas for example, what is an invention or a discovery, some kind of technology breakthrough that we could develop if we use that map that electricity is vibration? So, do you have just throw out something?
Sure. Let me throw out the most popular one, I believe, solar panel. So right now, the problem with the solar panel is it only operates during sunlight, say 8 hours during the day. So what happens overnight? But once we understand electricity is wave motion, so that's how light interact with solar panel. When light comes in, it's a vibratory electromagnetic wave. It's a vibration wave. So it created a vibration in the solar panel. So that vibration is electron vibration in the solar panel, vibrate with a light signal. So that's why you can create the electricity. So what happens in the night? We have an infrared light. We have so many different wavelengths of light. If we can harvest that one, so we have a 24/7 solar panel.
Wow. So you're telling me that there's a possibility that if we really rethink the foundations of electricity, it will help us guide ourselves towards maybe being able to have 24/7 solar panels. That's incredible. That's a leapfrog, folks, from the current concept of what's possible with clean energy. So I appreciate Dr. Wei-Ping Yu. You have really blown my mind here, and I want to know more about how we can explore these new ideas if we just have the courage, folks, to rethink the sacred cows of groupthink. I'm David Gornoski. You've been listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. We'll see you next week, Thursday at 8 o'clock on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. Good night.